The Get Rich Slow Club podcast is a collaboration between Tash Etschmann from Tash Invests and Ana Kresina from Perla. The Get Rich Slow Club acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land we record on. From coast to coast, across land, waters, and communities, we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Any advice is general and does not consider your financial situation, needs, or objectives, so consider whether it's appropriate for you.
Welcome to the Get Rich Slow Club podcast,
where we take you from beginner to confident investor,
where we can teach you everything you need to know about investing.
So come get rich slow with us.
Starting a business can be a way to accelerate your wealth, but it doesn't come without some risk. Today we're chatting to Jai Howitt, who founded a company that skyrocketed to $3 million in revenue before facing some challenges. I followed Jai for a few years now, and it's been incredible to see the journey unfold. But what I really admired most was the honesty, transparency around his business journey. But before we jump into his story and lessons, we have our money, wins, and losses. Jai, do you want to kick it off today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. And this one's a bit of a loss, to be honest. It was meant to be a win, but Rottnest Island is an island off the coast, just near where I live. And my partner and I bought like a 10 ticket over the summer thing to save money, because you could buy 10 and it's much cheaper. And then we only went once, so that kind of backfired. But then yesterday we were like, oh, we should use as many of these as we can while the weather's good. So we went over there and we drove down, and we were driving around for like 15 minutes trying to find a park to then get on the ferry. We missed the ferry, so that also backfired. So the lesson there, I don't know what the lesson is, but that was more of a money loss probably in the last little while.
Oh, how much was the 10 pass? Because Rotto is quite expensive usually.
Yeah, it's usually like $70 or $80 like round trip for one day. So I guess we paid, I don't know, it was worthwhile. It was like a couple of hundred rather than several hundred, but not in our case.
I've had that recently where I bought like a 50 pack of Pilates classes. I was talking about this the other episode as well. And I was sick and then went away a lot, so I haven't used them. So I'm trying to use like 17 or 19 classes in like 3 weeks, and I'm on track. But it's always great when you're like, oh, I'm going to save so much money by buying this, but then life gets in the way.
Yeah, gym memberships are a classic.
Yeah,
it's like the intent is there. The intent is great, but the chances are they make money off of you instead of you saving money.
Yeah.
Anna, what's yours?
So because I sold my apartment in Canada last year, I had to do my taxes in Canada, and they're the financial year. So I did my taxes finally in Canada, which means I can finally do my taxes in Australia for last year. Anyways, it's very complex when you are a tax resident of two countries, but I am just so glad it's done. Like, I don't know what it is about financial admin stuff. Like, whenever I get it off my to-do list, I feel like 100 times lighter. So I did my Canadian taxes. I did my Australian taxes. Now I'm going to have to do like 2024 taxes coming up, but yeah, I'm feeling better, feeling lighter, and I'm getting a refund from both. So that's also the double whammy of plus on my end. So that's my little money moment of the week.
That's a big one. I find tax stuff like doesn't actually take me that long, but I build it up in my head as such a big thing. And I'm like, oh my God, I really don't want to do it. And then I sit down and it's fine.
Also, Australian taxes are so easy in comparison to like Canadian taxes or American taxes. Like in many cases, you can do them yourselves. You don't need an accountant, right? But yeah, it's the money admin that can be overwhelming. So that's my thing.
Mine is we almost finished our book. So we're in the final stages of edits at the moment. And I wanted to print them out to go through and like read it with a pen. And it cost me $50 to print the book out at Officeworks. And it's the same price, whether it's single-sided or double-sided, which I think is a bit of a scam.
You literally could have bought 2 of our books.
Yeah. Or I could have bought a printer. A printer was $60, so I was debating that too.
Oh, well. Anyways, rest assured, for those of you buying our book, it is well edited by many of us.
It has been well invested in. Mm-hmm. So you have quite an interesting story, Jai. Starting off with going back a little bit, what was money like for you when you were growing up?
I love this question because I think our childhood really shapes who we are as a person. And for me, I believe I grew up with a lot of limiting beliefs around money. I'm one of 7 kids. Both of my parents are school teachers. There was a lot of like love and support in our family, and we're all very close. But financially, we have always, as soon as we hit 18, we were paying board at home and moving out not long after that. And if we were to go to university, we covered ourselves. So there was kind of like we grew up, actually, I say both my parents are teachers, but really it was just one teacher's income because my mum was busy having kids the whole time. And yeah, so I guess we grew up with more of a scarcity around money, and that shaped decisions I made. It kind of felt like money was hard to attain. When you had it, you had to hold on to it. It was less of an abundant kind of mindset around it. And so that affected me going to business later on because I had this ceiling, or an imaginary ceiling, that I would constantly be hitting, and it took a long time and still to this day to be moving that and progressing and being worth more. So that's an interesting one that I think comes into play a lot.
Yeah. Were you really good at saving if you had that scarcity mindset? Did you try and keep a hold of all the money?
That's a good question. No, I guess not. Not really. But maybe that's another quality that my parents really valued was adventure and experiences. So for example, when I was 14, we did 6 months in the States in an RV around with all of us, all 9 of us in a bus. And, there were experiences along the way. So maybe it's more about what is saved and then goes into experiences. When I hit my teens and set off into the world, I just wanted to travel and make just enough money to keep traveling. That was kind of my thing.
Did your family live in Cocos? I feel like I've seen so many tropical fun photos of you frolicking around in Cocos. Or was that a later thing?
It was a thing. My parents had a couple of different times in my life teaching contracts up there for 3 years at a time. So we probably spent 7 or 8 years total on Cocos. And for those who aren't familiar, it's like a small island atoll off the coast of Western Australia, very remote, 400 or 500 people live there, but also a very unique place to grow up and, around the water and just develop as a young human.
It looks like such a dreamy place. It's been on my bucket list for so long.
Worth going to, for sure.
I love that idea of growing up adventuring, because that was very much something that I connected to as well. Like I'd save the money and then I'd spend it on an adventure. But what I'm really curious about is also just your business. So you built and grew a company very quickly at a young age. Obviously, you've had influence from your family in terms of that, I would assume. So tell us a little bit, what is Brand Booster and where did it come from?
Yeah, Brand Booster was a creative agency or studio that I ran from I was sort of 20, 21 through to about 25, and I'm 26 now, so it was not all that long that I stepped away from that. And it was really a combination of out of high school, I picked up a camera, started doing wanting to travel and kind of just film fun stuff. That was more of a passion thing. And that lifestyle was incredible. I was able to experience some really cool stuff fairly early in my life, but then it came at a cost. I had very little money to my name. It was kind of always just making it by. And so I was I wanted to create something larger beyond me as well. I really cared about the space. I wanted other people to be able to work in spaces they could be inspired by with cool people around them. So I landed in North Fremantle in Perth, WA, and that was 2019. And I dabbled in various things previous to that, but content was kind of a common theme. And then I was what is something I'm good at and what is something that I enjoy? So it was shooting content for brands. So essentially we started just niching down into that space of shooting advertising content for e-commerce brands, and it did grow quite quickly. I think partly my social stuff was working at the time, and that attracted eyeballs, which definitely helped to grow it. But also just this blind faith that it would be okay and it would work out and I was on the right path. So in combination, just for context, we sort of grew to a team of 13 people in-house. I was probably 22 at the time, and we had a warehouse studio, and we basically worked with brands all around the world. So they would just send us products. We'd find models, we'd go and shoot the products and sort of build strategies for them to grow in their advertising and on social. So that was my world for 4 years, and it came with lots of ups and lots of downs as well.
We'll definitely get into the ups and downs. But before that, did you have a real job before you started Brand Booster? What were you doing before that?
Straight out of high school, I did a gap year job, which was basically at a timber mill, watching wood go past on machinery, 12-hour night shifts, the kind of thing, you do for a very limited amount of time. I just wanted to save some money. So I worked there for 6 months, and actually that's where I got a lot of ideas because I was just bored out of my brains. And beyond that, the family went back to Cocos summer after that, I think the following year. So my last job, I suppose, was part-time working in tourism. So just at the tourism shop on Cocos basically. And that was when I was 19. So none since then.
Yeah, amazing. I had a job as a support worker before, and I feel like that's where my whole Instagram started, just from having shifts where I was sitting so bored in the car for like 8 hours every day. And then I had so many cool ideas, which I don't have these days. So I think those boring jobs can be really good.
I totally agree with that. I think that's where all the greatest ideas come from, is like intentionally creating the space. I mean, call it boredom, or just like intentionally creating space. And that's, if you think about the places you get good ideas, it's probably in the shower or driving on long drives or the places you don't expect. And if you can intentionally put yourself into those situations, you come up with a lot more ideas.
Yeah, I find it quite hard these days because I spend a lot of time on my phone or online, because a lot of my work is on social media these days. And I don't really have a lot of time without my phone, and trying to intentionally create that can be really challenging. But having a job previously was so good because you had to put your phone away. I think that's such a good reminder to give yourself that space to just sit and be.
Yeah, I was listening to an episode or a book. I was listening to a book about mindfulness, and it was saying how we fill our space all the time. Like, for example, I was like doing the dishes. I'm already very busy with kids, and I'm listening to an audiobook, and a part of me is like, I'm going to actually now take this audiobook out and just do something without having to like listen or take information in. And it's true, like just creating those spaces will give you so many new ideas. It'll help make you feel refreshed, and also creates kind of mindfulness as well, which is really important, I guess, in business creation or even just life, right?
One of the most frequently asked questions I get about anything, like about money, about investing, about business stuff, about like even going to Pilates as well, is just like, but how do I start? So what was your first actual step or action towards Brand Booster?
I am a perfectionist at heart, and I don't know if this will resonate with the perfectionists. So it's something that like a lot of people struggle with. It's like they want the first thing to kind of be really thought out, and as a result, it never actually happens. I love the quote, if you're not embarrassed by the first thing that you put out, then you launch too late. And so I try to embody that. I try to embody the imperfection. I think get the minimum viable product out in the world, or in the case of posting a video, just get it out there. Because Mr. Beast, for example, who's the largest creator on earth on YouTube, he created 100 videos, 200 videos. I think it was several hundred videos before anyone even noticed him. And because of that, he got very good at it. He obsessed over it. He's a one percenter. But point is, it wasn't the first one that made it for him. And each rep, you get better at doing the thing. So it's a hard one because, that's more just a perspective and a mindset shift. But I think that's how you have to do it.
It's easy to focus on the end result, right? Like people who are successful and be like, how do I emulate them? How do I become that? So can you actually maybe share some of your challenges as you've been growing your brand as well, so that the rest of us who are maybe at the beginning stages don't feel as, looking at someone being like, hey, they've got it together. What are some of the big challenges in the early stages of Brand Booster?
Well, I'll rewind a little bit before Brand Booster, actually. So I knew I wanted to kind of get into this agency space, servicing clients. And prior to Brand Booster being a content agency, I was just like, I can help anyone, maybe I can run ads for so-and-so, or I can help gyms grow. And it's like the typical, teenager who's getting into agency. And the gym niche is one that I started with, and I lined up, I did crazy, outreach just every day, sitting down, messaging 20, 30 people. And at the time I was sharing,
hey, can I make videos for you?
Well, no, back then it wasn't even video. It was just, hey, I can help you get leads and grow your gym, get more people into your gym, basically. And the method would have been through running ads to basically generate them leads, which I also wasn't that qualified in. My plan was to outsource that part. So it's just like, I was just selling the bill. Anyway.
Selling the service before the service is fully there.
Right. It was kind of like my perspective is like, fake it till you make it, but then be willing to do whatever it takes to actually make the thing happen.
Yeah.
That was kind of my take. Anyway, I probably had 40 or 50 call them sales calls over the next 6 months. All the while, no income. I was just like all in on this. I was living at a family home. I'm in a bedroom I shared with my brother. And rejected on every single one of them. And that's just like one example. I made no income down that lane until I found the lane that made more sense to me. It was more aligned. There was more demand or whatever. But there's been so many of those situations over the years that people usually don't see. Usually when you share stories, it's the goods, the good things and the things you can teach people. But that was one of the reasons I started sharing more transparently online, because there are so many things that people don't see. And I think it's a false idea around building something. It's not as easy as it seems.
Why didn't you give up? Like, I feel like so many people would be like, I just give up. Maybe I'll go get a real job or something else. Like, I see a lot of entrepreneurs that just like, what is it that kept you going?
I don't know exactly. What comes to my mind right now is, one, I did have a weird burning belief that it would work, or I could make it work. Like, I believed in myself to just keep showing up. And that is only shown through your actions every day. If you say, I want to get up at 6 a.m. and then you don't get up at 6 a.m. consistently, you don't believe in yourself. I think doing things, so many people have integrity to the people around you. And if you say you're going to do something, go do it. I'm saying that for yourself. If you say you're going to do something to yourself, show up and do that. And so that was one thing. I think also I maybe trained myself a little bit. If I rewind even further, I used to growth hack Instagram accounts. I had a software where you could automate engagement. You could just like and follow and stuff like that. This was back in the day when it actually worked. And because of that, I was also posting. I had feature pages. I was posting 2-3 times a day on consistently. So, that takes a lot of consistency. But the point with that is I was growing those because I knew greater opportunities would come from it. I knew if I did something now in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, at the time I wanted to travel. So it was I knew I could probably travel the world and get some costs covered. So because of that, it was maybe almost the why, that the underlying burning desire to want to travel. And I knew this path was going to take me there. So regardless of if it worked or not right now, if it eventually did work, it would make sense.
Yeah, that why is huge. We talk about that all the time for investing and even just budgeting. It's really hard to stick to something if you don't know why you're doing it and you don't have that underlying deep fire in you to go and actually put in the effort for it.
Yeah, the other thing that I think about younger entrepreneurs as well is the ability to take more risk. I think as you get older, there are other things that you have and your why starts to change. So it's harder to take those risks. So I love hearing this story in terms of being able to be I believe in myself, I know my why, and I can take those risks.
And building that trust within yourself as well.
Yeah. Well, at the time though, I'm looking at it in hindsight. I didn't know that at the time. I couldn't have quantified it or had clarity on it. It just existed probably. So the awareness is more now.
So you started Brand Booster. You were messaging lots of clients with your previous gym business as well. How did you find your actual first Brand Booster client? Was that by messaging them too?
It was. I had sort of got to a point where I was groveling. There'd been a few little $1,000 gigs here and there, really just enough to keep the lights on for me. So nothing significant. And then I knew that I needed to get way outside my comfort zone. I knew my worth, quote unquote, was $1,000 a month or whatever. So I was if I'm going to sell something much greater than this, I need to go way beyond what I think I'm worth. So then I basically came up with a package for $8,000 a month, and it was 20 videos and heaps of variations, and it was a lot of volume. And I was screw it, let's go and pitch this to a few brands. So it was a cold message. I basically would have reached out and said something hey, who can I speak to about a few creative video ideas? And this particular brand hit me back. I was consistently doing it every day, 20 messages, whatever. And we went back and forth for a while, and eventually he took a chance and he said, yeah. And that client actually this was monthly as well. And that client became the backbone of the agency for 2 years. He actually worked with us for 6 months. He sold the business. The new owners continued on, and relatively speaking, paid us whatever that was. It was a couple $100,000 over a few years.
Yeah, amazing.
And that was the first one. So I don't know, maybe it was stretching beyond what I thought was possible. And then again, just doing whatever it took to make it happen.
Did you have a social media following back then? Did that help you?
I did, but it wasn't super significant. There might have been 20,000 people on Instagram, which helped just from when I was outreaching. It probably helped from a brand perspective. I looked legitimate. I wasn't just someone without a face and without any meaning. So that probably did help.
Somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. But it wasn't like I was getting crazy eyeballs or anything. It was fairly stagnant at that point.
So you ended up making $3 million in revenue, which is incredibly impressive. What was the turning point that helped you get there?
It was doing one thing. And if I'm talking a business sense, it was not trying to cater to everyone. We niched down into just producing essentially video ads for e-commerce brands. And even that's probably too broad of a niche. I would have gone further if I'd do it again. But doing one thing and having a repeatable system to do that thing, so you knew your margins, every time you did the thing. We can get into this later, but we ended up getting snowed in with just overhead was through the roof at one point, with the studio cost and the team cost, etc. And that's what actually ended up hurting us at some point. But prior to that, having the system in place to repeat the thing was really significant. And the actual, if we're talking how it actually grew, 30% of the growth came from TikTok, funnily enough, just me sharing that journey and what I was building. So the power of social is just crazy. 30% sort of came from referrals after a while, obviously just doing good work and people telling their friends about it, telling other people. And then another 30% it was from that cold outreach. It was just like being ruthless with reaching out to brands. And the final 10% maybe events and networking. So they were kind of the methods that we grew it. We never touched paid advertising ourselves and whatever other lead gen methods there are. And it just kind of snowballed within, I think we hit a 7-figure run rate within about 18 months of starting it.
Wow. That's really impressive.
That's amazing. Yeah. When did you decide to hire your first employee? Or did you always have someone there with you?
No, it was just me working from my dining room table. And in fact, my first employee also worked from my dining room table with me. And it was more just when I got to the point where I couldn't handle the workload comfortably because I was doing everything. I had to source the lead, and sales calls and then do the work and then all organization. So I was like, I just need someone initially to help me edit stuff because that's where the bulk of the time was taken up. So I put a story up on my Instagram and I had a young guy who was 18 at the time. He was passionate about creating, but like pretty early in his journey. And I think he just kind of wanted to learn the ropes as well. So he came and joined me, sat at my living room table for a few days before we actually got a little space. And that was the first one. And then to be honest, everyone after that was kind of the same. It was like, hey, I think maybe we're going to need some more help now. Let's just like put the word out and see if we could pick someone else up. And then you get to a point where you kind of put out job postings and something a bit more legitimate when the team can help with that. But I wasn't the perfect hirer or manager of people. I was much more an ideas person and just right in the creative side.
Yeah, amazing. I saw you had a really cool office at some point as well. When did you decide to get that?
That was actually pretty soon in. So 3 or 4 months in, we had a few retainers, making 10 or 15 grand a month, which isn't crazy significant. But then we had a $50,000 a month out of nowhere. We just had a couple of US brands that paid us in USD and it just looked great in AUD. And they were once-off jobs. And we basically took that money and put it into a warehouse space. I forget the exact numbers, but it was something like $30,000 bond, which went towards future rent payments. And the space itself was 60 grand a year, which was a lot. And I remember being in a spot where I was like, I see the advantage of it because I think it's a great marketing tool. I think it's a huge culture thing. You can bring people together. For me, I was probably naive enough just to just let me at it and try it out. And I also believe that when your back's against the wall, you really push harder than ever. So if I was put myself in a position where things were tight again, I'd probably just really keep driving. And I got that advice from a mentor. One underlying thing I didn't mention here is like having points of reference. There were people in the creative space who had done a similar thing before. I wasn't just going in blind. I kind of had someone to model off. I think that's true also in investing. I think it's true in many parts in life.
Was that like a mentor or someone that you didn't know?
Indirectly. Yeah, so I didn't know them. We weren't working directly together. We were like friendly because we'd chat every now and then, but he had just built a creative agency in the US. I was able to kind of structure things similarly and build it over here in Australia. So he actually said to me one time, he said, yeah, when your back's against the wall, you push harder than ever. I was like, all right, we'll pay for this warehouse. And it was negotiated a 2-year lease, so it wasn't a crazy commitment, but still significant. And yeah, it was like, I was just like, this is my dream space. Put the photo wall over there, basketball hoop there, table tennis, like the essentials, obviously, which, yeah, and that was a lot of fun.
How were those limiting beliefs going during that time? Like I know you mentioned having a scarcity mindset when you were growing up. How are you feeling making this huge investment and committing to employees and the warehouse?
It's still very restricted by that. I think maybe the reason that I was able to commit to those without thinking too much was because it was also the first time I'd experienced that sort of growth in like the income was coming in. Naively, I probably just thought it would keep coming in. So because of that, I felt safer in making these commitments. And now I think I'll probably be more conservative with that, later on in life.
What happened to make you feel as though you would be more conservative had you gone back in time?
Well, we basically, first couple of years, mostly all growth. Like I said, we sort of grew the team out and revenue in the first couple of years. And then we were sitting at $1 million a year run rate and we plateaued a little bit. So revenue took a little bit of a dive, but overhead was just through the roof. Wages were 600 grand a year, the space plus insurance and all the rest. We actually had a second office as well because we didn't have enough office space in the warehouse. So we're like over 100 grand a year. So you add those up and very quickly, you're squeezing out margins. So that year, somewhere around year 2 or 3, we made $1 million, but we spent 1.15. And that was something that I was naive to. Finances was something I probably neglected more than anything because I almost just turned a blind eye to it, and just wanted to keep charging on sales and marketing, kind of my zone of genius. So yeah, because of that, obviously you have to make decisions. And there was a point where I just said to myself, I'm going to be radically honest with myself this week. I let go of the studio, which I held a lot of identity to. I felt like, that cool young space, with a young team. So that was a big shift. I also let go of a few of the staff. Some had already left at that point just organically, and broke up with a long-term girlfriend of 4 years, just all in like 2 days, and just like kind of that reinvention of what I was doing. And yeah, so, to answer your question, what happened, we kind of then just leaned down. It got good again. It became profitable again. That last year in business, we were profitable, but obviously after incurring quite a lot of debt. So really came out of that no better off than when I started, except for a fair salary, during that time, and a lot of experience, and also just a lot of fun. Like it was, I was able to live the lifestyle I kind of wanted to. The warehouse was 5-minute walk from my house. It was all like I was still able to live the lifestyle I wanted to live at the time.
That week must have been incredibly stressful. How did you deal with all of that? Like accepting that you had to let go of your girlfriend and your office and your business, or some of the employees as well. Like that is a lot of change in 1 week.
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
Well, I think it just came 8 months too late. It was decisions I should have made much sooner. So once I realized that, it was like I didn't have a choice. So that's an interesting reflection, because I've had people say that, like, even during that week or the week after, like, are you doing okay? And my honest answer was like, yeah, I am, because I feel aligned. Like this was meant to happen. I understand. I recognize that now. Of course, in the moment, yeah, like shitty situations to navigate, but afterwards it was almost like relief, I think, more than anything.
I can't even imagine like trying to juggle all that. And obviously you mentioned like there were a lot of business financial learnings along the way that you didn't account for previously. What was some of the biggest learnings, I guess, like from starting a business, or something that you weren't aware of?
Yeah. So, well, at least things I'd probably do differently now if I was back in that situation. I would have run leaner from the start. I would have been less aggressive with hiring. I also understand how to incentivize people. That was a big one, is like, they were all employed and in-house. I would go with contractors. I would have be less married to the fact that I have to be in the same room as them. And those things can all help your costs, your expenses reduce as well. Working with talent overseas, etc. There's many options that you could take with that stuff, and that they were ultimately the things that really dragged us down initially. But also things like when we messed up a shoot, for example, it was 25% of our profit down the drain for that particular project. So if you did that twice, and we already had fixed costs for the project, so you did that a couple of times and you're in the red for that project. So it really showed the importance of having the right team on board and training them properly and giving them self-accountability, because not that I was a micromanager, but I definitely didn't always trust the output, and we always got there in the end, but it was usually due to a lot of feedback and stuff, not just from me, but from the rest of the team as well. And so I'll just be way more like relaxed in that process and make better, smarter decisions, tie, more and more compensation to outcomes rather than, paying people hourly, for example.
Yeah. Hindsight, hey, it's always interesting to be like, hey, what were the things that I would change? But then that just makes you more successful in the future, learning from those, right? Like I think it goes back Hopefully. To the comment about failure. Yeah, right.
I remember when I was watching one of your videos, you mentioned having a big tax bill to pay off. And like that even got me when I switched from being a sole trader to a company, because that can be really confusing. What was your biggest learning there?
Well, that kind of came mostly from that year where we just lost a lot of money. So the way that we offset that was, we would pay our expenses, and then it was the tax bills we couldn't pay, so we put them into payment plans. And that was something that I struggled with, because I had always come from this perspective that I didn't want to be in debt. I never took loan out for a car. Never took, I just believed that for the most part, stay debt free unless it's smart debt that you can use for the right reasons. So because of that, I struggled, because it was debt that I couldn't avoid at the time. And I kind of had to rely on other people's expertise, because I wasn't an expert in that space either. So there was a couple, accountant, for example, and I switched accountants a couple of times during that period too. So all things that maybe contributed to me just not having clarity on it. So I couldn't make the best decision. So it just ended up how it ended up. And I think that's the takeaway, is probably to take it more seriously, and just be closer to that process, or at least at the very least have them explain it much more in depth to you regularly so you can kind of be on top of it.
Yeah, it can add up really quickly when you're earning so much money in the 1 year. Like that's crazy.
I also love that you had a couple accountants, because I've had the same experience where I'm like, I don't jive with you. I don't like trust you. And like, it's important to have professionals help us with some of these things when we don't get it. And if you don't have the right fit, you can still go and find the right fit. Like whether it's a doctor or you know, a counselor or a therapist or an accountant or a financial advisor. Like these people know this stuff so much better than us, and we can learn from them. So I love that you've switched around a little bit with that as well. So I'm always very excited to have people on the show that talk about their business or building their business, because that's just not an avenue that I've taken for myself. I've always been really happy to work for someone else, you know, put away the email, go, you know, shut down the laptop at the end of the day. So for those people who are interested in starting a business or a side hustle and are looking to grow their wealth that way, what are some of your top tips of what they should do?
Oh, that's a good question. I think like find something, as cliche as it sounds, that you're somewhat interested or passionate about, because then you're going to have longevity. For starters, like going into a space and then find the avenue, find the business model, find the, you know, whatever. Have that reference point for starters. Know someone else or some other business that's done it before that you can model off and kind of do in your own unique way. I think that's very important, because that you're almost jumping over hurdles, having not to do it all yourself. And then, you know, to really build long-term wealth. I mean, my approach was always to build businesses and then at some point probably have an exit or, you know, some sort of capital injection at that point, which then can then accumulate into other investments. So I didn't necessarily get those with the first couple of projects or businesses that I ran. So then my step 2 is to build cash flow businesses. So an agency, for example, is cash flow positive. You know, it doesn't require a lot of cash to start it. You can be spinning up cash straight away, and then dollar cost averaging that into whatever it is, whether that's crypto, whether that's stocks, whatever approach you want to take would be my advice is just to go for a cash flow business that can then be put into other things. And, you know, at some point in the future, maybe that's investing in other businesses that you can strategically help grow. That was also sort of part of my plan. So I pivoted a bit since then, but that's kind of what I do. So
a part of your strategy is also having a business that can invest in other businesses. So you're, in a way, you're diversifying also where you're building your wealth. Right. Yeah. But that takes a long time, many years. And that was another big lesson for me. I was young and impatient and just wanted things quickly. And, you know, I had this fear of unfulfilled potential was kind of like my greatest fear. So now I'm a bit slower and like happy to wait and not rush it. Unfulfilled potential is quite a deep one. Do you think you've fulfilled it now? You're on your way? Or that's less of a fear now? Yeah, not fulfilled it by any means, but just less of a fear. Maybe holding less attachment to ego. Maybe not feeling like I have as much to prove. You know, when I was younger and starting things, you know, you kind of have that ego inflated a bit when people like, even my parents, you know, who are proud and wanted to see me succeed. And then you lose that edge when you get a bit older and you know, you're no longer the teenager in business and suddenly you're just a regular dude that's trying to build something. So yeah, less attachment to it, I would say. Yeah, I kind of had that a little bit as well, being like the young person doing stuff. Like I was young when I invested and I was young when I bought my apartment. Yeah. Then as I get older, I'm like, oh, there's people doing lots more than me. It can't be the age thing anymore. Yeah. But one of the main things I got from your like top tips for business stuff is just trying like absolutely everything and seeing what works and what sticks and just keeping going with that. You mentioned a story where you stepped away from a business, you didn't have an income and you were starting another business. How did you make that decision? Because that seems quite tricky to give up an income completely to put your time on something else. The truly honest answer is there was a mushroom journey involved in that process. Not solely, but it was part of it. And there were some books. There's a book called The Way of the Superior Man. It's up here behind me. And that book, one of the chapters talks about a man's life is like an onion, and each layer of the onion is their purpose at that point in time. And as you peel back the layers, you become closer and closer to your true purpose, whatever that might be. And that has been something, when I read that, it was actually the first time I stepped away, or when I first stepped away from Brand Booster, was after reading that book, where I just suddenly was like, oh yeah, that's so true. It's like I've learned a crazy amount. I've been able to have this experience. Maybe I didn't have the big financial win, but I'm content with that. I'm happy to move and take that learning into the next thing. And it was almost the same thing with the second business, which was an e-commerce brand.
And that one I co-founded with a friend, and I ended up stepping away from that last year with really relatively no financial gain either. But the reason for that one was a little bit different. It was more that I believed I could create more impact in the next year or 2 years of my life in something else than continuing on that path. For that particular business, our goal was probably to exit at some point, and to do that, it would have been our full focus for a year or two, both of us. And I was just weighing up, would I rather do this and have the outcome, or would I rather go into something that I can spend the next 10, 20 years of my life in, be very aligned, potentially earn a lot more as well, and kind of just start earlier in that pathway. And that was kind of the decision I made.
Yeah, I find so many people get stuck when things are not bad enough and don't leave things because they're like, oh, good for now, and I don't know what is the better option, and it's not painful enough to change. So it's amazing hearing that you had those moments and knew when to leave without it falling apart completely.
I was going to say the same thing. It's like a strong sense of self. It feels like it's really important to have, right? And it seems like you have that. You know when you have to keep pushing harder because your back's against the wall, or you have to switch careers because of the situation at hand. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what is it that you know about your own like needs or reason, or peeling back that onion,
Well, I'm glad it seems that way. I appreciate you saying that. and Tash, what you're saying is so true. It's like when a business is going really poorly, it's easy to step away from. When it's going really well, it's probably hard to step away from. So you just continue in something that maybe you don't really want to be doing, but it's just like doing well. Doing well is also good. But it's that middle ground where it's like kind of okay, not bad enough to step away from, not well enough to just like keep going with. That's the really dangerous spot. And I don't think I'm any sort of genius with, all that much self-awareness. I think it was more a timing thing for me. I think I'm inherently lazy, probably a little bit selfish, probably make decisions that are going to benefit me. So for me, I was like almost returned to my roots where I was, 18, 19, and just wanted to travel the world and enjoy that process. And maybe I'd come to a point in my career where I was feeling that again, just some freedom and flexibility and leaning into the thing I actually wanted to be doing. So maybe it was more of a selfish decision to just say, oh, I'm done with this other thing. Let's go on and do this. And for context, when I stepped away from the brand, I went incomeless. I went totally incomeless for 6 months last year, and I traveled for most of that 6 months, burnt a lot of money doing that too. And the intention was to kind of be able to reset and almost like live into that presence, like what you're saying before, Anna, about doing the dishes without listening to an audiobook. It's like driving down a road without feeling the need to get to the end really quickly. Instead, you just pull over all the spots you pull over. And just like, for me, there was a lot of guilt around any time I wasn't working. I felt like I was wasting time or could have been doing something more productive. I still feel that, being back into business now. So that presence became very important. And I was consuming a lot more in that world. So it was more than anything what I cared about at that point.
And just not doubting yourself and being like, cool, I'm going to give this a go, just see what happens, because it'll all turn out okay in the end.
Yeah. Just trusting that it'll be okay in the end. Yeah, totally.
I know you speak a lot about the importance of community and having a network so that you can turn to people, and that's really important in business as well. Can you tell us like why is this important?
I think most people feel private and guarded for the most part, especially to do with money, business, like whatever it is. And yet we all experience many of the same things. So by being able to experience that alongside other people, not only does that forge very deep bonds, but you're both winning. Like it really is a win-win. And so when I stepped away from previous ventures and was trying to work out where I want to spend the next 10 years of my life, it was something I really valued, which was community. And more than that, just like interesting people that were also getting after it. They were trying to be better every day. They were trying to learn every day. So Art of Mondays is the new project, and it's basically a private community for founders in my case, but I think these communities can exist in many different forms. It could be around interests, it could be around investing, it could be around many things. And so we just basically create spaces for founders to come together and connect with other like-minded founders, kind of like a group therapy thing. We also run co-living houses around the world, so we just go and live in spaces with these people, and just like this giant think tank of interesting people coming together. So that's not only a passion and a project for me and a lot of alignment, but it also helps a lot of people, and that's something I think beyond, as you progress in life as well, you just want to create more impact in what you do as well.
Yeah, the co-living sounds really awesome. I've kind of been secretly stalking what you've been doing, and it seems like it's a really fun idea, a more more people should definitely be doing it. But thank you so much for joining us. This has been such an interesting chat, and I think people can take a lot away from it.
Where can people find more about you?
I am pretty much jai.journeys. That's JAI.journeys on most platforms. And happy to connect as well. I love a good voice note or something like that. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you found this episode helpful, please rate us 5 stars, write a review, or share with a friend. If you're new to investing, make sure to listen to our first 10 episodes. Follow us at Get Rich Slow Club or Tash at Tash Invests or me at Ana Kresina.
This show was brought to you by Natasha Etschmann, who is an authorized representative 1299881 of Guideway Financial Services, AFSL 420367, and Perla, who is an authorized representative 1281540 of Sanlam Private Wealth, AFSL 337927. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to investing. So make sure you check out our financial services guides and read the product disclosure statement and target market determination for any investments you're considering. See our show notes for more info.